Good. Welcome to you all for this late summer webinar, UNICOM Work Package 1, Community of Expertise. Sorry for the delayed starting. You have the chance to present you a very interesting topic. We have more than 200 registrations for today, which is a very good number, I must say. The purpose is to navigate global and national identifiers by using IDMP and FHIR. And you see we have 4 speakers who I'm going to present briefly to you after, and 2 panelists to interact with our audience. Before starting, we have a few rules. Some of the participants may know these rules, but I will be brief in this. To remember you that everybody's on mute, except the one who is speaking on the stage. You have the possibility to ask questions at any time by using the Q&A facility. I'm going to show you where this is. In the case for some reason, I would give the microphone to one of the participants. We ask you to be concise in a question or a comment, and because that facilitates also the dialogue between many. And in the course of the Q&A, you may also show your approval. And again, I will show you how this works. You will have later the possibility, you are invited later to answer a short questionnaire about your satisfaction regarding this webinar. So first, to access the Q&A facility, you move your mouse on the screen, and then you see the function bar popping up on the bottom, and there you click on the Q&A, and you will see such a screen where you can ask a question, and you may receive a written answer, depending a bit on the type of a question. Otherwise, we will keep that question for the roundtable at the end. We estimate that we have 1 hour presentations and half an hour for the discussion of your questions. Once you see the question of another person, you may show your approval. That's shown on the left of this screen with the thumb up, so you can activate your own thumb to show your interest in that question. And if there are many questions, the number of thumb up changes the rank and bring you of that question on the top of the screen. This is a secure webinar in the sense that everybody has a private personal access code, so we count, of course, that people don't share this codes to anybody, since the attendance is free. The session is recorded, and is made available on the UNICOM YouTube channel after this meeting. And as I said, you will have a questionnaire to fill, and we hope to receive many answers. Today, I already mentioned that we have 4 speakers and 2 panelists. Esther Pelen is working at NICTIS. She is also engaged in IHE Europe and in UNICOM in the work package 1. She is, I would say, the driving force for today's presentation on the UNICOM side, since it is a task for work package 1 to deliver such a use case, a demonstrator. Greg Anderson is working with Pfizer. He's a very active HL7 participant. He's also very active in the space of Gravitate Health, which is another project from the European Union. And actually, we have synergized between the 2 projects for the current activity. Giorgio Cangioli is with HL7 Europe. He is also very deeply engaged in UNICOM, and he will give us some insight regarding the technicalities of the demonstrator. Leonora Grandia works with Z-Index in Netherlands. It's a medicinal product dictionary. And she is engaged in ISO TC215 Working Group 6. And she's also very deeply engaged in UNICOM in different work packages. The panelists, we have actually 2 HL7 chaps. Hugh Glover is currently one of the co-chair of working group in HL7 International. And Rick Smithy is a British consultant, they both are British, British consultant working a lot with the European Medicine Agency, and also very engaged in the HL7 work. So this is the people who are going to convince you about the interest of what we do. This is the hyperlink, a bit long, for the questionnaire. You will see it again, and it will be also made available by email. With that, I give the floor to Esther Pelen to start the presentation. Esther, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Christian, and good afternoon or good morning, everyone. Yeah, please go to the next slides. So I'll take you through what we are going to cover in this webinar this afternoon. We will start with a patient journey, and this journey brings together some findings of both UNICOM and Gravitate Health projects. In May, there was a HL7 FHIR Connectathon, and there we sat with a group of people, representatives from both projects, where we defined and explored the ways how we could use the IDMP identifiers in the FHIR world to benefit the patient, the healthcare professional, and also the National Medicinal Product Dictionary. And I have to stress that it was a kind of experiment based, of course, on what was already existing at that time. But it's not set in stone, and it's open to further development. But it gave us the opportunity to explore and to see where the IDMP identifiers could bring value for the 3 stakeholders I just mentioned. So we also will shed a light on the IDMP identifiers and the connection to Gravitate Health, the importance of having structured data, which will bring a lot of benefit that you will see later on. We dive a bit into the techniques, how FHIR resources are worked and can be used in the use case or the patient journey. And Leonora will close with the perspective of a national medicinal product dictionary. Next slide. Yeah, so here you see Helen, who is the subject of our patient journey. She's from the UK and works as a business lawyer. She also has diabetes type 1, and for that she takes a medicine called Humalog. So Helen collects her information on her medicines in an app, and that is also using information from the International Patient Summary. So for instance, on the drug she is taking for her diabetes, she collects some information on, for example, the strength, the brand name, Humalog, and a couple of identifiers that you see on the screen here. The first one is the global PHPID, the Pharmaceutical Product Identifier. And at her thumb, you also see the Medicinal Product Identifier and the Medicinal Product Package Identifier. For her work, she is traveling to the Netherlands to have a meeting over there. And in the train, she is working to prepare herself. So during the travel, she feels a strange feeling in her lower stomach. And she kind of recognized that feeling because she felt it before. And she is thinking she might have a urinary tract infection. And she knows that she will need some medication to address that infection. So when she arrives in the Netherlands, she goes to the nearest hospital and she goes to the emergency department over there. On the sign you see spoedeisende hulp, which means emergency department. So she sees a healthcare professional, and after taking a test, indeed, it appears she has the urinary tract infection. Since she suffered from that before, she also knows that she, in the UK, would be given Monolil as a medicine to get over the infection. And on the screen, you see the past medication, where the specific drug is displayed. So you can see here the brand name, the active substance, the strength, dose form, route of administration, and you see also 3 IDMP identifiers. So in our experiment, we took the global PHPID as a starting point. And the healthcare professionals start searching in the pharmacy information system on the global PHPID to see if there are any equivalent products available in the Netherlands which have the same PHPID. And here you can already see a bit of the FHIR resources that are applied in this search. And we will hear a bit more about those later. So a lookup is done in the Medicinal Product Dictionary. And in the case of the Netherlands, this information is already incorporated in the pharmacy system. In other countries, it might be a separate lookup. But in the case of the Netherlands, it's in the system of the hospital. Yes, and here you see how different resources, FHIR resources, are linked together and how the search is being done. Please click. And based on this specific global PHPID, there's 2 results that come up. So the healthcare professional assesses both and picks the one that is most suitable for Helen's situation. The professional makes a medication order in the system to go to the hospital pharmacy. And here you can see Helen in the hospital pharmacy to pick up the medicine that is the right one for her. So she gets the package, which is also called monoline. And via her app, she scans the barcode that's on the package to retrieve some product information via the GS1 digital link service. And that will give her, for example, the global trade item number of monoline and also the brand name and some other relevant information. So being in the Netherlands, the product insert is obviously in Dutch, which she cannot really understand. So she wants to know if there's any known side effects for this drug known. And for this, she opens the medication app and she connects with the Gravitate Health server to obtain also the English product insert information. Please click. So here she retrieves the product information in English that she is able to read. And she finds out that there are no relevant or worrying side effects for this particular drug. And she can carry on and doing her job, giving a presentation without needing to worry about anything. And the infection is being covered. So with this, I would like to hand over to Craig, the next speaker, who will shed a light on how IDMP identifiers are used in the electronic product information and in FHIR in general. So please, Craig, the floor is yours.
Okay, thanks, Esther. Okay, so let's go a little bit behind the scenes and talk about FHIR. We'll talk a little bit about IDMP and Vulcan API. So as Esther mentioned, this is a collaboration between UNICOM, Gravitate Health, which is an innovative medicines initiative, and HL7 Vulcan. And we recognize this opportunity with FHIR and the ability to use FHIR and IDMP together with product labeling, together with apps, to help improve the patient experience and make sure that we empower patients by providing them with relevant information to kind of help them be more confident in their patient decisions, as you saw in the scenario with Helen. So next slide, please. So what we'll do is walk you through some of the things that we've been doing, but first, just to back up 1 second, just talk a little bit about FHIR and why it's so important in these scenarios and why you see it coming up so often in these scenarios as we discuss. And really, this comes back to interoperability. And it's the ability to exchange information easily across systems. So when we go to a hotel or an airport, anywhere in the world, you can connect to the Wi-Fi, you can send emails, you can go online and do your banking, you can go to Amazon and do shopping, and it's all seamless because the internet, because of email, because of Wi-Fi are all based on a common set of standards. So any devices that are compliant with those standards can easily exchange information and interconnect with each other. That's something that's been very difficult in health. There's been probably many attempts, but nothing that came to that same level of interoperability that you see with the internet. And then this is where FHIR comes into the picture. And FHIR is kind of our latest best attempt at trying to bring that internet type interoperability to the healthcare space. And if we go to the next slide. So what is FHIR? So FHIR is an HL7 standard, and it's a common way of encoding and exchanging health information. So it's based on internet standards. So the same kind of technical foundation that we talked about earlier in the previous slide about the internet is based on XML, HTML, the same kind of things that Amazon and other high-tech companies use. on the internet to build apps and exchange information is built on the same or similar foundation. Because it's based on that similar internet foundation, it's much easier to work with, it reduces the implementation cost, and it gives us that common technical language for us all to speak, so it makes it easy to exchange information. Not only is it just a standard, based on internet, HL7 also did something that's really smart, is to make a set of prefabricated templates. Now they're called resources, but you can think of them as templates in a sense. Next slide, please. And if you look at these resources, so here's a screen capture from the HL7 FHIR website. You can see there's 151 of these templates, and what they are is templates of various concepts related to health. So for example, you have a template for organization. And when you look at that template, you see there, you've got a template for an organization. You've got an identifier, you've got a name, you've got an address, you've got contact information. You look at the address, that's the common structure of an address. So this is where you start to see this interoperability come into play. Because if you and I agree, okay, when we are going to exchange or describe information about an organization, we agree we're going to use this template. We agree we're going to use these attributes in this order and this format. And then that way, we are now speaking the same language. So instead of me speaking one language, you're speaking another language, and we need a translator or multiple translators in between, and things are difficult, now we can communicate with each other directly because your system understands what I'm sending to you, and my system understands what you're sending to me, because we've all agreed that the information will be structured in a common way. Another example is ingredients. This is another one, common one, and obviously in drugs. And you see we have the identifier, the role of the ingredient, whether it's active or excipient, the strength, allergen indicators, and who's the manufacturer. A lot of detail there. And then the next slide, you'll see that when we talk about the identification of medicinal product standard, the ISO standard, you talk about, okay, IDMP is a standard and helps us harmonize how we describe medicinal product information. That information and the information from those IDMP standards, the data model, the constraints, the requirements, some of that information has been incorporated into FHIR. And when you see some of these resources here, especially in that bottom right corner, where you see regulated authorization, packaging, ingredients, pharmaceutical product, this is how information is, IDMP compliant information is structured and exchanged back and forth. Next slide. So so that's FHIR, and that's a little bit about IDMP. So where does EPI come into it, or electronic product information, or depends on where you're in the world, what it's called. SMPC in Europe, product monograph in Canada, drug product label in US, but generally we're talking about product information that's incorporated into the label and presented to patients, or product information that's presented in systems. So let's take a look at the product label. And you say, okay, if you break the product label down into pieces and its components, you say, okay, well, what's in a product label? And you say, okay, well, there's an organization, there is packaging information, there's ingredient information, there's information, clinical use about contraindication, drug-drug interactions, drug-food interactions. And what you do is you essentially go shopping through those FHIR resources and those FHIR templates and say, okay, here are all the things I need from that to build a product label, or to build and structure electronic product information. So we're building out the EPI with that, with those FHIR resources, those FHIR templates in mind. We're taking IDMP information, which is already partially embedded in FHIR, and then plus more IDMP information and embedding that all inside the EPI. And that is on top of what is already there in existence. So each health authority's product label is still the same. So the text is still the same. The section headings are still the same. This does not compromise any of that. So all the regulations are still the same. The requirements for the labeling are all still the same. But on top of all of that, you add all this extra information in a format that systems can easily access that information, easily exchange that information, and it makes it machine readable. And if we go to the next slide. Right, now we talk a little bit, so Esther mentioned in the Helen scenario, she mentioned the PHPID, or the Pharmaceutical Product Identifier. And what that is, you think of that as a generic ID for phosphomycin, in this example, phosphomycin 3 milligram oral solutions. So all phosphomycin 3 milligram oral solutions, the concept is that all phosphomycin 3 milligram oral solutions would have the same PHPID. So if you had multiple brands, multiple manufacturers that make that same substance, that same dosage form, that same strength, those would all have the same PHPID, and it would make it very easy, as you saw in that Helen scenario, to find them all at once. So if you do a search on the PHPID, they all come up in the search. So this is why control vocabularies are so critically important, is because the substance identifier, the unit of measure, the strength, the dosage form, those codes for those terms are used in a formula to produce the PHPID. So if any of those variables change, then you get a different PHPID. Next slide. So what we do is we have a substance ID for phosphomycin. We have a PHPID that we generated earlier based on the strength, the dosage form, and the substance. And then we incorporate that as well as other information into the leaflet. So the leaflet is XML, so it's XML that's compliant with FHIR. The metadata that you're seeing on the screen is the XML, and the IDs are compliant with IDMP, and you incorporate all of that into the leaflet. Next slide. Now there's different ways. Now when the data is in XML and it's structured, there's different ways to view that data. You can view it as a graph in this example. So this is one API that is based in FHIR, and that is presented, the data is presented as a graph. So each block is one data object, and the blue lines are the relationships between those objects. So you see in the middle there, you see all the ingredients of the drug product, and the lines are pointing to the manufacturer. So meaning there's a relationship between the ingredient and the manufacturer. So this is a behind the scenes look of what's going on with the FHIR data, the FHIR structured data with the IDMP identifiers. And you can imagine this is just one. So you can imagine if you did an entire portfolio and all kinds of correlations and analyses that you could look at. Next slide. So this is another example. So that previous example is more of a kind of hardcore data science, machine learning, kind of data analytics view. But here's a more human-friendly and more kind of normal view. And our colleagues, Petter Erlend and Knut and Gunvald, Norwegian colleagues working with Gravitate Health at the January-May FHIR Connectathons earlier this year, they gave a demo of this concept where you could focus the content in an API together using the information from the International Patient Summary and an app that captures patient information. So in this example, the patient is 75 years old. So it is recognizing that, and is recognizing the gray section in the API is related to pregnancy. So it's recognizing the two different data sets, and it's suppressing the text. At the bottom, it's highlighting the text because it's recognizing there that she has in her app is stating that she's lactose intolerant. And in the metadata of the API, it shows that it contains lactose. Therefore, it is highlighting the text. So this is just another scenario, just like what you saw in the Helen scenario, where the pharmacist could use the PHPID, the metadata, to look up similar drugs in that similar PHPID family. So just another example of the use case of what happens when you incorporate FHIR and IDMP data into an API, and then couple that together with an app that has information about the patient's, demographics, as well as their medication history. And then with that, I think I'll pause there and hand it over to Giorgio.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Greg. Next slide, please. So we have seen in the previous presentation how the scope of the common testing of Gravitate and UNICOM project. It has been described the scenario for the Helen case. Greg introduced how FHIR can be used for generating electronic product information that can allow to be used for a smarter access to this information by patient, relying on the data that you can have in your personal health record or in your international patient summary. Next slide. What I can hope to be able to do is to give some more detail on what has been done during the last FHIR Connectathon. Next slide. So the starting point is the international patient summary. This is the minimal international patient summary that has been used during the set, as described before by Esther. We have some minimum information about allergy, about the condition, and then we have the data related to the homolog and the about the medication that the LN is taking. And for this medication, the WHO Uppsala Monitoring Center has generated Phpid that has been used as described before, and we will see more in detail later, as a key for allowing the access to the electronic product information. Next slide. So in the IPS, in the International Patient Summary, typically a medication is documented by using a medication statement, and the product data are conveyed by a separate medication resource. The consideration that we can do now, however, do not change if we consider other resources like medication requests or medication administration that might be used for accessing, for example, through international patient access services or other services, data that you can have in your EHR or in your PHR. Next slide. However, as you can see and had described before by Greg, the type of FHIR resources that are using the API are not the same. These are typically the definitional resources, and this independently by the fact if these resources are embedded into a single bundle or following the EMA approach, they are just referred and stored and managed by a separate service. So next slide. So the point is how to maintain the linkage between the two. This is a nice graph that is also included in the standard produced by Rick, and I'm sure that Rick can provide all the detail that you need to if you want to. But the basic idea is how to keep the linkage and the relationship among these different kind of resources. Obviously, they are different because they need to serve different needs. So the basic assumption is that you should have identifiers that are present in the, let's say, clinical resource that could be used to refer directly to the other one. This is the quite straightforward if you think a single jurisdiction, but it may be not completely true from a global perspective. So as we have learned in the previous community of practice workshop. So the first point is to assure that there is this right relationship and across these different resources, and this can be enabled if we use IDMP identifier and related attribute. Next slide. So coming back to our example, this is how the information that are in the International Patient Summary look like. So we have possible different national identifier. You may have classification as etc. And in that case, we had the possibility to have a PHP ID that, as described before, is used as a key for searching for the medication into a specific service. This medication can also convey other data describing the medication, and this may, for example, be used for supporting the minimum attribute list for health that UNICOM defined for the cross-border services. Next slide. So the main idea is that, so in the exercise that we did during the last Connectathon, and we hope to continue in the next one in Baltimore, and really I invite all of you, if you are there or if you are to join us in the Connectathon. So the idea is to make a lookup by using in that case, the PHP ID as a search key, but in order to obtain information about the medicinal product. In our test, we try to obtain the MPID, the medicinal product identifier, that then is being used to retrieve the electronic patient information. But in nothing, avoid to think that in other cases you can use, for example, the GTIN that you can read from your box in order to get this information, or in absence of the PHP ID in the intervention, you can use some identification attribute that allow you to perform this lookup. But just to coming back to our test, we use the PHP ID and we obtain the medicinal product. There is also the FHIR resource ID, because if we are in a configuration like that in EMA, you can think to have the ID of the FHIR resource and to use that to retrieve the API. So next slide. So these services can be offered by different services like an MPD system or an API system, or by a single one. In the case, next one, in the case of our test, next one, sorry. Thank you so much. So in the case of the test that has been performed in May, we use the UNICOM FHIR IDMP server to perform this lookup. The search was done on the definition resource. This is what we have tested. As above, nothing prevents to think that you can have this kind of lookup by using other different resources like medication knowledge, but this is not what has been tested, but it may work in the same way. And through the ID that we obtain by the product lookup, we query the API, because the API, as described before, is a document, is a FHIR document. So you can query knowing that the medicinal product definition are part of the subject of that composition. So you ask for all the API that has as subject that medicinal product. I put a line in a dotted line because for the time being, we have a list of medicinal product. There is an ongoing request to modify the maximum cardinality of the subject composition from 1 to 0. That might allow to refer directly the medicinal product as a subject, avoiding to have this additional list layer. So next one. So this is how it look like if we get a look to the resource. So we have this ID that is inside the medication resource of the IPS, and this can be used to retrieve all the medicinal product definition that are referred by the administrator product definition that match that ID. I don't know if we have time. It might be an interesting topic to be discussed also with Rick, because obviously an administered product definition maybe not necessarily describe an IDMP pharmaceutical product. So this is a thing that might be further investigated in the next Connectathon and maybe discussed today. But this is the way we have tested thing in the last Connectathon, and we obtained the API from the API server. And next slide. So I don't know if it's already too late, but just to add a few additional things, maybe you can skip directly to my last slide, just to mention that in order to, next slide. Yeah, thank you. So just to, one of the objectives that we have is to allow to have a smart visualization of the electronic patient information. So to allow if there are contraindication, indication of possible substance that might impact with the allergy that you may have. Obviously, this we identify some possible issue related to the usage of different code system in the clinical space and in the regulatory space, different level of granularity that you may have in the IPS document and in the related product leaflet. And this might be approached and solved by using available map and technology services, and what we have discussed to be able to obtain the MPID from other identifiers that are documented into the IPS, and this, as described before, can be resolved by providing support through product lookup services. And a way to support that is through the availability of medicinal product dictionary that will be described right now by Leonora. So I will leave the floor to Leonora. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Giorgio, and good afternoon or good morning, everybody. As mentioned in the previous presentations by Esther and Giorgio, a medicinal product dictionary from a certain country can play a role in finding an alternative drug, for example, in the case of the journey of Helen. And in this presentation, I will firstly briefly say something about the medicinal product dictionary. What is it exactly? And then go more in detail how an MPD can support this use case. Next slide, please. So in brief, a medicinal product dictionary is a drug database, but more in detail based also on the definition from the ISO standard about the medicinal product dictionary. An MPD consists of sets of identifiers on different levels of hierarchy with relations between them and with information and identifiers about medicines to support several use cases in healthcare. Next slide, please. And these use cases are prescribing drugs on a generic level or on the level of the product itself. It helps for dispensing the drug, for choosing the right drug to dispense, but it also supports a reimbursement of the drug, ordering the drug from the pharmacy to the wholesaler and also from the wholesaler to the manufacturer, and also some other use cases in exchanging the information between healthcare professionals and so on. Next slide, please. And if we look to the type of information in a medicinal product dictionary, based on the ISO standard, an MPD should include at least information on substances, on the pharmaceutical product, which is the active ingredients, the dose form, and the strength, and also information on the medicinal, the specific medicinal products or the packaged medicinal products, because that are the things that you are dispensing actually. So at least that should be present in your medicinal product dictionary. This can be structured in a different way, in a hierarchical way or more a mirrored structure, but that's not the topic for this presentation. Yeah, but just to show that there are different types of structure for a medicinal product dictionary. And ideally, this information is also connected with decision support to do on the spot during prescribing, during the dispensing, yeah, the right checking for the drug, the allergy checking, drug-drug interactions, contraindications, duplicate therapy, and so on. Yeah, to make sure that you dispense the right drug for the right patient, which is safe and also effective for that patient. Next slide, please. And although there is a standard for that describes internationally, globally, how an MPD should be organized, still there are local implementations for an MPD necessary, because from country to country or region to region, then there can be different things to address. For example, the prices of the medicines that can differ or will differ between countries, the rules for the reimbursement. And when I look, for example, to the Netherlands, we have also the Dutch standardized extemporaneous preparations in our drug database. So that makes it necessary that you still will have per country your own local medicinal product dictionary. Next slide, please. And there are already many countries that have a medicinal product dictionary with data that is mostly based on the product information, especially for the medicinal product itself or the packaged medicinal product. But also other sources can be used, for example, SNOMED CT for the hierarchical levels like substances and the pharmaceutical product, or maybe other sources like the INN. And this means that these MPDs have local IDs, at least no IDMP IDs for PHP and MPID, for the simple reason that there are not yet these global IDs. Which means that if an MPD will support the use case for Helen, there should be a link between the local IDs and the IDMP IDs. That's necessary to support this use case. And I just mentioned it here, but that's also not the topic of this community of expertise that is discussed in one of the previous community of expertise. Next slide, please. And now I come to my point, how an MPD can support the use case of Helen. What you see here is are the Dutch drugs with fosfomycin. You see it are the three on the left-hand side, the names in Dutch, and on the right-hand side, our local codes. GPK code is the equivalent of the PHP from IDMP. And here you see in the last line, in the Netherlands, we have a fosfomycin granulate, 3 grams, which is the same as Helen used. So if the system is looking for the Dutch equivalent of Helen's PHP, he will find the fosfomycin granulate 3 grams with here the Dutch code, but that will be linked to the IDMP code. And imagine we wouldn't have that drug, then the doctor should see the other 2 of products with fosfomycin in order that he can choose another alternative, and he could have chosen the upper one, so the powder for oral solution. But in this case, it's not necessary. The system can find the fosfomycin granulate 3 grams. Next slide, please. And here you can see all the details in the Dutch drug database that are behind this equivalent for the PHP. So you see in the middle, yeah, I can't point it with my mouse, but you see in the middle the phosphomycin trometamol, so the active ingredient with next to it the amount, the strength, 5.6 gram of the total active ingredient, with the unit, the gram. On top of it, you see the dose form, the granulate, and in our database, we also have the route of administration included in the PHP, so also that it is an oral product. And in the second half of the slide, you see also the ATC code linked to this TPK or Dutch PHP. Next slide, please. This PHP is placed in a hierarchy. Here you see the Dutch hierarchy of our database, with on top the active moiety, the phosphomycin, avoid of the salts and modifiers. The blue line, you see the equivalent for the PHP, and furthermore you see HPK, which is the equivalent for the medicinal product identifier. And you can see that there are two products in the Netherlands on the market, the monorail and also phosphomycin focus granulate, that is also shown in Esther's presentation. And the monorail has two packaged products. Actually, in this case, it is not a different pack size, but it is the original and the parallel product. And if the doctor prescribes for Helen her alternative drug on the level of the PHP, the pharmacist can choose whether he will dispense the monorail or the phosphomycin focus granulate. But imagine he will choose the monorail one. Next slide, please. Then here you see some details of the medicinal product. Of course, there are far more, but here in this slide, I only put the excipients. So you can see that in our drug database, the phosphomycin, now the monorail, has the excipients as shown here. And you see it includes also saccharose, but without the amount, because in a granulate, there is too less saccharose to do decision support on it for patients who have diabetes. But imagine there would be a considerable amount of saccharose in monorail. You should have seen here a certain amount, which will could give an alert for Helen when she has diabetes, and that is also taken into account in the decision support. Then based on the amount of saccharose in the monorail, there will come an alert to warn the pharmacist and the prescriber that this product contains saccharose and that it should be taken into account for Helen because she has diabetes. Next slide, please. And here you see some details of the packaged medicinal product of the monorail. In the previous one, it was the medicinal product itself, but on the lower level of the packaged medicinal product, it also includes the pack size and the information about the reimbursement. So here you see on the upper line, that is the local number for the PCID with the name. You see also the GTIN, so that can be the handle to search also for the EPI. And to see it is one sachet, and also the price is included, which can be used for reimbursement of this medicine. So in this way, the data of a medicinal product dictionary linked to IDMP can support a use case like Helen, who is traveling to the Netherlands and needs an equivalent for her UK drug here in our country. So I thank you for your attention, and I hand it over to Christian.
Thank you, Leonora. Thank you to all the speakers. And I think we have had a very interesting session to now. And I see there have been a lot of questions raised in the Q&R. So now I'm closing my screen sharing, and all the speaker can share the camera again. If I look at the pending Q&A, I see a gentleman writing global PHP ID are dependent on global substance ID and global agreed dose forms. For substance, we have FDA UNI codes, and EMA is implementing SMS ID for substance. How close are we to having a global ID for these items? So I suppose we have in this meeting Malin Flatbat from WHO UMC, and I would like her to answer that question if I find her in my list. Or you may raise your hands.
Hi, Christian.
Here we are. Voilà. Excellent. Please.
Can you hear me?
Yes, please. Yeah.
Yes, thank you for the question. So since you all know that we need a global substance identifier in order to create a global PHP ID, we are having a collaboration called the Global IDMP Working Group, where we collaborate between FDA, EMA, and UMC to create this global substance identifier. And I think it's very short to say that FDA and EMA, they have collaborated on a long time on their substance identifiers. So they are in quite well sync. So what we're doing now is that we're fine-tuning the business rules that they have worked on for a long time and finalizing the ones that are missing in order to have a harmonized system to create these identifiers.
Thank you, Malin. I hope this answers the question from my colleague. And the question was from Jan Mever. I don't know how you pronounce this correctly. Voilà. And I hope the answer is correct. We have then another question pending as well from Ed Hammond. If every drug has its ID bundled with ingredient strength, dose form, etc., but I want to know simple. If patient is on a given drug, I have to know all the combinations in a formulary. Who wants to answer that?
I think it would depend on the pharmacy system, but I think most systems would have the information broken out. So you probably wouldn't just have a PHP ID and nothing else. Most likely, like in the screenshots you saw in Leonara's presentation, or in the Helen scenario in the app, where you had multiple IDs. You had the PHP ID, you had the pack ID, the medicinal product, you had the strength, the name. So most systems would probably break everything out into that granular form in the pieces. And then it's a matter of choosing which one you're going to search for. So if you want to search for the brand name, you can. If you want to search for the active ingredient, you can. If you want to search for PHP ID, you can. So all that information would be available. And then it would be up to your system and your system design to figure out which of those you want to use and which of those you want to display, or which of those you want to make available for search.
Yeah, because you have relationships between the MP ID and the PHP ID. Whether you start with the PHP, you will know all the products that share the same PHP. Or when you start with the MP ID, just a certain product of the patient, you can see what is the PHP of this drug. So I think it doesn't matter where you start, but because of the connections between the different levels of detail, you will come where you want to be.
In fact, this is already a hard question, because if you say, is the patient on paracetamol, acetaminophen, how do you know that? Because that ingredient might be in many products. So it's already a hard problem. So you need to be indexing the product by its name, its manufacturer, its form, its substance already. So we're only adding indexing here. We're not taking anything away.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that if I can add, this is the reason why in the UNICOM part we have the so-called minimum attribute list. So we have the identifier that can help to identify a thing, but we supposed to provide, when we exchange cross-border, also the set of attribute or that can help to better identify the product. And the other thing is that it depends also how the information are captured. And you can capture information about the drug at a different level, depending on the use case or depending on the jurisdiction as well. So the point is, if that question is just to reuse that information in your context, or how to enable that other context or other jurisdiction can know and can interpret correctly the information about the drug. So that reason I don't think there is a single, so you provide the information that can be useful for another party to interpret correctly the product that you have submitted. Because if you are in a single jurisdiction, it might be enough to have a single code that is using your jurisdiction. That's enough. So, but it's not true in other cases.
Yeah, and this is one of the core reasons behind why we need IDMP and why IDMP is designed the way it is. So you have a brand name, you have the manufacturer, you have a unique ID for the manufacturer, you have a unique ID for everything that's in the drug. So yeah, it's all of these attributes combined together that help you identify what the drug is. And then you have apps and e-health records that help keep track of what drugs the patient has been taking, what they're prescribed, and what they're being dispensed.
Thank you. Perhaps Hugh or Rick want to add something to what has been said to now? No?
I had to go already, so.
Yeah, you did, as I know, but you perhaps.
Well, I'm not sure I have a huge amount to add. I think one of the key things in all of this work is that we are providing a framework, and that framework will be populated with data, and it's putting that framework in the right structure. Much as Craig was talking about having templates, what we are effectively doing in all of this work is putting in place a set of templates for the identifiers. Once you have all those identifiers in place, you're able to actually build that set of linkages between things, which allows you to answer the sorts of questions that are coming up in the chat. We didn't have these things, then we'd be unable to answer them.
Okay, let's perhaps move to the next question. Who will publish the EPI data, and what is the timeline for publishing this data? Maybe, Craig, you're in the best position to answer that.
Yeah, sure. I think it'll be very similar to what we have today. I just think the systems will progressively get more advanced. So for example, what we have today is the market authorization holders, the pharmaceutical companies. They publish the EPIs on their website today, but it's just in PDF format in most cases. In the US, FDA publishes all the approved labels in PDF form. There's also Open FDA that allows you to access the SPL, the XML form of label. And you have Daily Med in the US that publishes all the XML labels and presents them in a really nice view. EMA, as some of the people on the call may know, is working on a FHIR EPI standard. They have a really nice test website that they put together that displays the FHIR EPIs in a really nice way. So I think that will continue with the health authorities will have their websites, the manufacturers will have their websites, and then you'll have third parties that are like Daily Med or others that will present, store and present the information. You have throughout the healthcare system, you have companies that aggregate this data. So they'll take the information from the product labels and they'll incorporate it into health apps. So if you have a nurse or a physician walk on the floor of a hospital, they have apps that provide them with information. So as an example. So I think it'll be very much the same as it's just that there will be more information available to them, more detail. And because of FHIR's capabilities, interoperabilities, the IDMP capabilities, it'll be easier to access more detailed information and exchange it.
Thank you, Craig. Maybe walk to the next question, and then we have perhaps again a more general discussion.
Oh, and Christian, sorry, there was one question about just the US and URX norm. There was a lot of discussion on that one, so yeah, we might want to just comment on that one because that's a good one, and there's a little bit of discussion there as well.
Yeah, it's a good question indeed. But I saw in the written responses, and I assume everybody can read that, that Robert Stegway did answer that actually we are working on it. It is rather complicated a question, but we have to not forget that when IDMP has been conceived, it was with a very strong US input. And now the way we can synchronize or link together RX norm and ADQM, this is something which we are working on. There have been, if I'm not mistaken, 2 publications on that. So, I mean, we are not in a parallel world. We are really taking this in consideration to build something global and workable for the both sides of the Atlantic. So, but it's a bit a complicated question for here an answer, since our experts, is it from ISO or UNICOM in the space of pharmaceutical dose form, are not with us today. But if somebody wants to add, of course, you are welcome. Okay, I don't see anybody waving. I move to the next question, which is a very pragmatic one, and I like pragmatic questions. PHP ID are generated at 4 levels. We spoke about that today. Level 1 is substance only. How can one determine at which level a given PHP ID refers to? That's very pragmatic. Who wants to answer that?
Shall I give a first answer and maybe others can add to it? Yeah, how I see it before me is that indeed there are 4 levels. And when you have your own medicinal product dictionary, you should decide which levels you will link together. So we have also the level of the substance. So then we can make a link between PHP ID L1 to our substance in our database. We also have the level of the PHP L4, so we can make a link, a mapping between the PHP L4 and our Dutch equivalent for it. So the more levels you have already in your MPD, the more linkages you can make to PHP L1, L2, 3, and 4. And based on that, the system can see whether you have it indeed a drug on the PHP L4 or maybe only L2 or L3 or maybe only L1. And then you can have, based on the highest level that you have, see which other PHP you have in your local medicinal product dictionary. So I think it is a matter of making the mapping between the level of the PHP and what you have in your drug database, and that makes how precise you can have the choice between for the alternative drug that you are looking for.
Thank you, Leonora. Yeah. Do we have another comments to this question?
Well, I might comment a bit, I think. If you get an identifier arrives on your desk, so something arrives 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, there's always a question as to exactly what it means. And if that's all you've got, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, your only solution really is just brute force. You compare it against every list that you've got available, and if you get a match, then that might be the thing that you're looking for. But the real missing thing, if what you've got on your desk is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, is something that identifies where that came from. And I would expect that anybody who's transferring identifiers around would also be saying what set of identifiers that is drawn from. So it would have some sort of system identifier with it. So your 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 arrives on your desk, and along with it is a separate identifier that says, I'm a level 1 PHP ID. And if we don't follow that good practice, then it makes life a lot more difficult. Yes, you can do the brute force, but it's not a brilliant way of doing things.
If I may add, Hugh, for the time being, the system identifier for the PHP ID is unique, depending on the level.
Right.
But this is not a problem if the only thing that you need to assure is that it's unique inside that identification space. So if you are sure that the ID is unique, then you can know that this ID is referring to a PHP ID, and then you can resolve and understand what it is about.
And certainly in FHIR, all identifiers come with an extra label to say what sort of identifier it is, and that could be exactly. PHP level 1, PHP level 2, if you wanted to go to that level of granularity.
Yeah, indeed. Fabulous. I suppose we have answered this question to Norman's satisfaction. The next question is a bit in line with that one. Is there any agreement in Europe on which level of PHP ID that should be used to exchange e-prescription in Europe? I don't know who can answer that from us, because we are a little bit.
I mean, for the time being, the minimal attribute list, the point is relying on the possible existing attribute. There is a space to convey the PHP ID independently on the level it is, but on the perspective, in the short-term perspective, there is no such a kind of discussion on analysis. So there is a way in the current specification of MyHealth.eu to convey the PHP ID as soon as it will be made available. And what in MyHealth.eu is focusing on is on identifying what are the attributes and that can be used for the identification of the product.
Thank you, Giorgio. I think we summarized quite well the status as we conceive that at the present time. I think it is also important to know that in the context of UNICOM, we have developed a so-called UNICOM FHIR IDMP server, and this has also the purpose to enable us to make some trials and demonstrations on the use of these identifiers. Hugh, you may say a few words on that.
Yeah, thank you. So I think a good analogy for this is learning to drive a car. We pretty well, all of us now can drive a car. I guess there's somebody out there who doesn't, but the majority of us do. And if you've done it for any length of time, it's dead easy. You get in, you turn the wheel, you go in the direction you want. But if you remember back to when you first started, knowing how much to turn the wheel, and which sequence in which to press the pedals and move the levers was actually quite difficult. What we're dealing with all of the IDMP structures and coding all of the data and putting it into these formal FHIR structures needs quite a bit of learning and quite a lot of detail. If we could concentrate just on aspirin, we'd actually deal with, I think, something like 60% of all requirements. And it's all the edge medications that give us trouble. So the things that have got multiple packages with multiple items put in them, and things that have got ingredients where the strength refers to something else. If we were to set out to do all of our design work in the abstract and then say, right, that's all finished, I think we'd have a great deal of difficulty, in the same way as putting somebody in a car and telling them to drive 200 kilometers. And what we have been doing within UNICOM is to create a server in which we can load a whole series of different products, and actually the same product from multiple countries, so that we've got an opportunity to see both the practical problems that people have. So what is the identifier that I need to use for this particular coding that I'm going to put in for drug 4, for the particular set of ingredients? Does that tie with what we use as a regulator in my country? So we have at the moment just under 100 different products put into the UFIS server. And that is still increasing, and working through the detail of that. And we're going to be making that available that anybody who wants to look at how these products are put together and what content they've got in them will be able to go in and take a look at those and learn from the way in which we are doing it.
Thank you. I think this is a good addition to what has been said to now, to explain this this context in which we are moving, since IDMP is not live, but we have to dispose of something to train ourselves, to discover where we have possible difficulties to overcome. Maybe before I go to the next question, I would like to ask everybody on the stage, what is your learnings from the FHIR Connectathon which we attended in May this year? Because we referred a lot to that today. Did you have an impact saying that you have to change the course of the project, or did you have confirmation that we were on the right path? Who wants to say something?
Yeah, Christian, I can start. I think, just as you said, I think it was confirmation that we're on the right path, because in the January Connectathon, the May Connectathon, we had a lot of people around the table from health authorities, from industry, UNICOM, e-health, developers, e-health experts, and I think we all agreed that we're on the right path. This is heading in the right direction. FHIR is the right platform. IDMP is the right standard. The scenarios are right. We're doing it for the right reasons. So I think that was definitely a big takeaway for me. The other takeaway for me is just how critical terminology is to this. And it makes it so obvious when you structure the information and you present it this way. It really exposes how different the terminologies are across regions. So, as we've discussed earlier, it's a very tricky subject. It's going to be a very difficult subject to resolve, but I would hope that, as we transition to standards like this, it kind of exposes that need for us to harmonize on, terminologies internationally.
Yeah, I would like to comment on that as well, and I completely agree with Craig's findings. It was also very exciting to work together on kind of the same scenario. We had a lot of discussions also up front to see what would the scenario look like ideally. And it also helps you to identify the questions that are still open. So when you try to connect the dots, you also realize how many things are not decided on yet, and that's natural. I mean, but it makes it more tangible, so to speak. And there's still a lot of work to do, but also a lot of opportunities. And we just saw one scenario, and I said in the beginning it's an example. But I think we can elaborate on that. And there are much more scenarios to be worked out. So I also would like to take this opportunity to the audience. If you are interested in getting in touch with us, or if you have some idea, please bring it forward, and we can always see if we could take that up and use it for further development.
Thank you.
I think I would add one other thing that was true of the last Connectathon, but I think is true of Connectathons generally, and that's about understanding boundaries. It was noticeable that some of the conversations that went on about particular topics were actually things which were not really to do with the real issue that we are trying to deal with. But it's all part of this learning process, and understanding what it is that we are doing. And we've seen that in some of the questions today, not to detract from those questions at all. They're all valid questions, but we all need to ask those sorts of questions to be able to understand where the boundary of what we are doing actually sits, and what problems we're trying to solve, and what problems will still remain that other people will need to resolve in a different context, although they all make part of the total solution.
Thank you. Maybe Craig, you may answer that question about the patient perspective.
Yeah, so definitely we do always try to keep the patient perspective in mind. So for example, on Gravitate Health, we have a number of members on the team who are MDs or have a medical background. We have a working group that is focused on kind of the patient advocacy side of things. So yes, in discussions like this, it is very easy to get kind of lost in the details and the technical side of things, which is quite distant from where patients are. But there have definitely at the Connectathon, both January and the May Connectathon, we had a lot of discussion about patients, patient perspective, how patients actually interact. Like in your example, a lot of patients don't know the brand name, much less the active ingredient, much less what an EPI is. So for example, some of the discussions we had was in apps like what you saw with Helen, or in the other example that we showed, we had discussions about should the patient even be allowed to add their own medications? Should a healthcare practitioner add the medications to the app for them? And maintain the e-health record and the international patient summary record for them. So there are a lot of unanswered questions, and it is definitely a tricky area to kind of make easier. But it's something that we discuss regularly, and we have members of the team that are looking out for that. But like you say, it's not going to be, the technical things will get solved long before we, kind of come up the chain to make life easier for the patient, but we're at least headed in the right direction, I think, to try to make that easier and a better experience.
To the very specific point in the question, IDMP and the FHIR version of it have the ability to say whether the pill is blue, brown, or yellow, or even have an image of the tablet. So putting that raw data in there, so if the patient says I'm on a blue pill, you can search for all the blue pills. So that we're looking at that sort of thing.
Yeah, and I think bridging the gap between a blue pill to a difficult brand or generic name is indeed very difficult. What I see in the Netherlands is that we try to bridge that gap a bit with our medicinal product dictionary, for example, for the dose forms, that you don't put the full EDQM name, which can be disturbing or difficult, but make it a little bit more easy. So film coated tablet is just a tablet because, yeah, what does it matter for a patient? What is the full name for it? So that he has on his label, on his package, 3 times 1 tablet, for example. To do in that way, to make at least instructions a bit more simple. What we also have, not in our drug database, but there is a separate system that has for all medicinal products a picture, so that you can see it is blue, it is round, it is a triangle, and so on. So, things like that can help when the patient says it is a white tablet. No, okay, I think the options are still too manifold, but to see whether by such type of tools can help to bridge the gap between patients who don't know more than the shape of their pill to the difficult medicinal product names and all information, without saying that you can always fill all that gaps. But I think that are the type of tools that you can use for trying to make more connection between the scientific information and the patient himself.
Yeah, I think also we have some limits to what we can do. What Ed was raising as a question about possible multiple medication for the same person. I don't know, 15 different medicinal products a day. Of course, these people are sometimes in a very difficult situation to remember what was it. And I think especially to elderly people who are, they even don't know exactly the shape and the color of the pill. They just say, oh, my green pill was not in my pocket this evening, but they know very little. So we have some limits, certainly, where IT can support, and when there's certainly the human interaction has also a role to play. But that brings also to the last question from Ed Hammond about the medical errors, or the errors in the medication administration or prescription. I think the point is that today we have systems to support the prescription, and we have sometimes also the clinical decision support systems, which are from time to time a derivation from the medicinal product dictionary, an additional service from there. All these things already exist, and even then we make errors. The addition of IDMP identifiers has the purpose to reduce these errors. The purpose is not to replace existing system, but to add a slice of security above it, because the way we identify a substance, for instance, is different to the way the substances are identified with an INN. So when you combine the both, you should come to a higher level of security in what you are doing or prescribing or administering. So I wouldn't see a danger to have IDMP in addition to the existing systems. Any comments on it from others?
No, thought you covered it.
Okay, so we are very close to the end of this Community of Expertise. First, I would like to thank all the colleagues on the stage. I don't want to forget to thank Robert Stegway, who is the man behind the scene organizing the answers, not the question, but the answers. And that's very important, so that nothing goes lost. And sometimes also he can add information about, for instance, a published article on the relationship between RX norm and EDQM. So that's also helpful for our audience. thank you to everybody to have joined us. We haven't set the dates precisely for the next Community of Expertise. It will be in October, possibly on the 21st of October, but it's not sure. In the meantime, some of you may be interested in learning more about what happens between UNICOM, IDMP, and IHE. And for that, there is a meeting in the middle of September where the attendance is open, of course, and we are happy also to host interested parties there. But that's not in UNICOM, it's in the context of IHE, but we are talking and working on the same directions. Again, thank you to speaker and panelists. And with that, I close today's Committee of Expertise. Thank you for your participation and see you soon. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye,
Thank you.
everyone.
Bye-bye.